Good days. Boom and boom. Welcome to the Good Days podcast with Eddie and Charlie. Eddie is actually on location up in Wisconsin. He's getting some cheese up there. I mean, that's what Wisconsin's about, cheese, right?
They got the best cheese.
The best cheese ever.
I can't speak for myself on that, but that's what I've heard.
Well, we're blessed with two special guests, Marty and Tim from Nappanee Missionary Church up in northern Indiana.
Amish country.
Oh, yes. There's some good Amish folk up there, aren't there?
There sure are. You're going to pass a buggy or two when you get to our church.
Yes, our town motto is embrace the pace.
I like that.
Which means slow.
Yeah.
Slow pace.
Slow pace.
It's hard to embrace sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, a couple weeks ago, actually 2 weeks ago on this podcast, we were coming out of Easter and celebrating, some beautiful times as a family. And we were talking about our kids with DJ Coleman talking about discipleship last week. And, I was telling them that, I respect Peter the Cottontail, the rabbit bro.
The rabbit bro.
Well, he brings, a rabbit that lays eggs is, pretty cool creation.
It's pretty unseen before.
Taking care of the kids, these girls and boys, like getting, an egg that's filled with chocolate.
Where did this originate from?
Well, we're just talking about the things that we do with our kids. And,
Yeah.
And I was telling him, it's like Peter Cottontail, that bro is like so cool with adults. He even lays like that Cadbury egg.
Oh.
Those are good days.
Those are real good days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You guys have a good Easter up there at Nappanee?
It was great. It was our part of our spring break week for our students. So some of the families were gone. They're out of town.
That happens.
Those centers. But, yeah.
So before we dig into a bunch of questions I have you, why don't you tell for everybody, what do you do right now, but what is your experience in youth ministry as well?
Yeah, sure. So currently right now, I am the lead teaching pastor at our church and do a bunch of other random things as well with that. But my experience with youth ministry, I was our high school pastor for nearly 8 years at our church, and then I oversaw our student ministry program for about 2 of those years.
That's cool.
And currently I work with our young adults as well. So I'm not quite, that's kind of removed, but kind of still in it.
But you're still teaching the students. You're doing
Sure.
speaking events for other churches.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, and I do our marriage and family.
All right.
I do a lot of our counseling. So my background, though, in youth ministry for about 10 years, I was a small group leader and had a passion working with students.
Yeah.
The intention was when I went to get my counseling degree was to work with adolescents, and that shifted over to more marriage counseling.
So Marty, you came to IW back in the day.
I did.
So
a
did
long
Tim.
time ago, yep.
Graduated in 2012.
So, and you're 201?
Yep.
2001?
Yeah, 2001.
2001.
Those were good days.
Yeah.
They were good days. I had a radio show here back in the day, the Marty and Marty show with Marty Reiswig.
Oh, my,
Colorado.
bro.
Look at him promoting his own show on your show.
I love it.
It was horrible.
Shout out to Marty Reiswig. Dude, he's a good bro right there.
Yeah.
So, do you know his wife very well?
I do, yeah.
She was in my youth group
Really? Okay.
back in the day.
So you know him, yeah.
Know him well.
Yeah.
I told her, don't date that bro.
And she did anyway.
Yeah.
He's a good dude.
Mercy dated.
Mm.
JK, super cool. Marty, we love you.
Absolutely.
All good. So as we dig into this, you are experienced in so many different levels. And so we really dig into youth ministry, how to connect with people. We're active in ministry right now, living day to day sometimes. I know for me, in years in youth ministry in the local level, some days it just seems like you're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And so we might dig into this. This is my first question. Were there days that you just tried to survive the ministry just to get to the next day? And is that good, bad, or is that an ugly practice?
Absolutely. I mean, there's for sure those seasons that are just
Mhm.
crazy. You know, student ministry in particular for us in our context was you have seasons where you're on a full-on sprint, and then there's other seasons that are a little bit more relaxed, and then it's boom, you're back into another sprint. And yeah, one of my mentors, he always told me early on in my youth ministry days, he said, don't quit on Thursday, because Wednesday night was our big youth event.
Oh, yeah.
That was the big, we had our most students coming out. We put our most effort into those events on Wednesdays. And so by Thursday, you know, I'm exhausted. That's my day off.
Mhm.
And before, when I was single, not married, didn't have anything going on in those days, I would just sit with myself and rethink everything and get defeated on certain things if one, you know, moment didn't go well. And so, yeah, when you're tired, when you got that space, when you're alone, that's when, for me at least, it was like danger territory. And so my mentor was always like, don't quit on Thursday. Don't quit on Thursday.
Marty, when you think about rhythms with people and your counseling background, it's like, do we all need healthy rhythms to be consistent in ministry? Or if we are not healthy first individually, then can our ministry be healthy?
Yeah, I think we all have to have some level of like rhythms. I think for some people, they need a little bit more structure in those rhythms, and other people just need to have like some kind of structure.
Mhm.
So I think everybody's different in that, but definitely when it comes to self-care, which is some things that, yeah, that's one thing that I preach to people that I'm sitting with. Like, how are you taking care of yourself? Because it's so easy to get burnt out when you're carrying the load of ministry and walking alongside people through stuff that can be real, just tough and heavy. Like, it weighs on you. So you've got to be able to take care of yourself.
So that's the cool thing about this podcast, this episode. Tim having your background in youth ministry, Marty having your background in counseling, and you both love that generation of ministry, and you love the pastors.
Yep.
So I'm going to kind of throw something out at you, and then you can take, turns to whoever wants to answer this. But if I were to go back and quote a little C.S. Lewis, and the basic quote is, I wish I had it in front of me and I don't, but you can't go back and change the past, but you can right now change the end. And so things that have happened in the past, there's nothing you can do about it. You can worry about it. You can stress over it. But what can you do proactive today to change your end? And have you seen in ministry people that are like their future? And I think what he means by the end, he means change your future. Have you seen people whose future has been sabotaged because they're stuck in their past?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. You can get, so self-defeating, toxic thoughts, stuck. Man, I wish I would have done this different. And for me personally, there was a season where I was really wrestling through that. And I ended up going into counseling and seeing my therapist. And one of the best phrases that she gave me, and it's probably well known, just that I did the best with what I had at the time. And to allow myself to have grace with myself as I look back on certain things I would totally do differently. Messages I'd probably never preach, if where I'm at currently in my life. But to allow myself to experience grace in that I did the best. I really did. I put my heart, blood, sweat, and tears into things. Did it always turn out the best? No. Would I go back and do things differently if I could? Absolutely. But to allow myself just to be okay and say, you know what, you did what you could. Now you know for the future, keep pressing forward, keep going on. And so extending that grace personally to me was a big deal.
You think, Marty, that if we don't reconcile our past, then it sabotages the future?
Well, I think part of it is your perspective on your past. For some people, it's this mistake that I made or this failure or whatever that may be becomes an identity for certain people. And this is who I am. This is how people see me. But when we can change our perspective on that and understand this is just a chapter in your whole book of your life, and to see God using it in different ways, I think that's a completely different perspective. And I think that then helps you understand, okay, what is the next chapter that I'm writing right now, and how does my past play into that, and how can it have a positive effect on that?
Wow, man. See, this is something everybody's dealing with, I think, across the board.
100%.
Whether you want to admit it or not, I mean, I remember clearly on those nights, because our big night back in the day was on Thursday night, and then at Skyline was on Sunday,
Hmm.
and then we had things throughout the week. But after that service or that time that you really have to press, going back and micromanaging your memories, and all of a sudden that narrative all of a sudden starts to float in, and a little bit Tim Keller kind of reels back in my mind where when your identity now is linked to your ministry, some days you're great, you're amazing, you're the best pastor ever. Some days you're a dumpster fire, you're the worst, you don't belong in ministry.
For sure.
Yep.
And so these are real things that people that are listening to this podcast are dealing with, maybe even as they're listening right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we're gonna pretend like we're speaking to them, like personally. So I want to go through a couple items of advice. What would you say to people that right now are struggling with feeling like they're a dumpster fire? Like things are not going well, things aren't happening. It seems like a long time since that God moved.
Yep.
And how can we encourage people? Because the next thing we're going to do is talk to people when things are going great.
Yep.
And that might be just as dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you two say to people right now that are questioning their calling, their worth and their value? Because it just seems dry.
Yeah. For me, two things come quickly to mind. The first one is counseling. I mean, if you're really struggling with anxiety, you're in a season of depression, you find your identity is really mixed up, because that is so real in ministry that our identity becomes I'm Pastor Tim, or whatever your title is. And so I think when you get in those spots, it is so helpful to have an unbiased, safe place to process with.
Yeah.
And someone who knows how to ask the right questions and to press into the right things, because there's stuff in our past, there's stuff about our present, all those different things that need to be worked through. And so to have a professional do that is a really, really beautiful thing. And I'm not saying that just because Marty's here. But and then number two, for me, it's always been switching up spiritual disciplines too in those seasons where if things feel dry, I feel a little distant from God. I'm not sure what I'm doing, my call to ministry. Whether that's, if you're not a journaler, all of a sudden start journaling. If you're not in the Word, get in the Word. For me, I have a thin place. That's what I call it. Kind of like one of those places where heaven meets earth. It's a very sacred place to me. And I think it's finding those sacred places. So for me, my main one this season has been this prayer labyrinth that's out in the woods in this area. Many people know about it. And it's literally this area dedicated to prayer and pressing into the presence of God. And for me, whenever I get stuck, that's a place that I go to. Mm-hmm. And I try to only use it in very specific moments that I can go to. It's a set apart processing place. And so I think finding some of those places, switching up some of your spiritual discipline rhythms, for me has been a super helpful thing.
Okay, before we go on, Marty, I want to dig into this for a second here. That is switching up your rhythm, switching up your patterns. So what are some other things that you've done besides the prayer labyrinth?
Sure. Another one, I don't know who told me this a long time ago, but I really do believe our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual life is very intertwined. And so for me too, I can notice if I'm not physically engaging my body, that I can get unhealthy mentally and spiritually. And so for me, running has been a thing, and I know running's not for everyone, but for me, that's been a very therapeutic process to get into. Yeah. And at one point I was given permission by people, like, switch up the rhythm of your day. Instead of going out to lunch, like, pack some clothes, go for a run during your lunch break, and, do the rest of your day that way. Just changing up even the rhythm of your day and how you normally do your day to day can be a huge thing. And so for me, that was a big deal.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I wish running was mine. Mine is like going to like the state fair and finding deep fried food.
Hey, everyone's got their own thing, if that works for you, or going hunting up in Michigan with
yeah, or that.
Yeah, whatever it is.
But like, I mean, if you go to the fair and they got that Twinkie that's deep fried,
don't do it.
How about like the elephant ear?
Have you ever seen a deep fried stick of butter?
Yes.
Did you try it?
I'm so ashamed.
You did not.
A little bit. I felt like I had sinned.
Wow.
It's the worst ever.
Yeah. That might be a sin.
But man, they had deep fried everything. Or I mean, everything was like covered in batter. And all of a sudden it's like, they had this sandwich, that was like a really nice, like, you know, sandwich that they would cover in batter and deep fry and call it a Monte Cristo.
Ooh.
And then
One of my weaknesses, deep fried food?
What's that?
Pickles. I'm a sucker for good deep fried pickles.
Mm.
Gets me every time.
Yeah, so your discipline of going to running and exercising is better than my discipline of something at the state fair that's deep fried.
Hey, but I'm sure you're enjoying good community when you're out there with people, and
I do enjoy, like the grilled, like corn. You got to enjoy that at the state fair.
Hey, that's a vegetable, right?
It is.
Yeah,
It's not deep
street
fried.
corn. Yeah,
Street corn with
All the
slathered in butter.
mayo and butter,
Oh,
and
gosh.
Hey, why do you have to go there?
I'm just saying.
It was straight up vegetable,
I'm just saying.
isn't it?
Yeah.
This is. I appreciate your wisdom. Thank you for helping me process this.
Hey, sure.
Marty, going back to you now that I've
Sure.
completely ruined the vibe.
No,
Thinking about that when people are not in a good place,
Mhm.
and from your counsel perspective, and they're struggling with, am I worthy? Do I have value?
Yeah. So a lot of times when people come into my office, they're either feeling alone, feeling hopeless, or a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found myself going through seasons of burnout, it can often be a combination of those two. And so when Tim talks about, counseling and seeking out professional help in that, that's a great way of just knowing that you're not alone on the journey, but
Mhm.
even to have people in your corner, people that you can go to that, you can confide in and just be, what, I'm struggling today. I think there's just this stigma that in ministry, we have to have our stuff together and that we can't struggle. But
Yeah.
that is so far from the truth. We're human. It is so normal for us to go through seasons where we just struggle. We get burnout. And to know that that's normal. The other thing too that can get us in real deep weeds is the comparison game, where we just, I'm not as good as so-and-so, or the things that we see on social media, people are posting whatever it is of what they're doing with their ministry, or even just teammates, that their ministry may be thriving or, doing really well. It's
Yeah.
easy for us to go down that path of, oh, I wish my ministry, or I wish I could communicate like them, or I wish I had time to meet with students this much, or whatever that may be. God has called you in your ministry in this season that you're in, and trusting that you're there for that specific time. His timing is always perfect. And sometimes I have to remind myself of that, because I get stuck in the, what am I doing here? It seemed to be screwing everything up.
I heard a mentor tell me that to find that person to talk to, it doesn't have to be somebody that's in your local context.
Right.
In fact, sometimes it's better not to have somebody
For
that
sure.
you're working with to be able to download, dump
Mhm.
on for years. For me, that was Eddie Shigley.
Mhm.
No matter where we were in the world, I could connect with him, and it wasn't every week, but process, be vulnerable. How important it is to have somebody, or at least a few people that you're fully vulnerable and honest with.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I'm one of the greatest gifts in this season for me is I've connected with a pastor from a different church in our area. We get together once a month, and we tell all. There's no holding back. It's here's what I'm struggling with. Here's what I'm frustrated with. Here's how I'm hurting. We call each other out. And I asked him when we first started meeting, I'm like, dude, I need somebody in my life to ask me, hey, is there any sin in your life that you need to confess?
Mm-hmm.
And to be a safe place to do that with. And so to have that type of person in your life, again, out of my context and where I'm at in my church, that has been the greatest gift in this last season for me, to have that person.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, some of my close confidants, don't necessarily attend our church. And I think there's some value in that. Not that I'm bashing our church or anything, but just to know that I have the freedom to unload whatever is going on that I'm struggling with.
Man, it's making those dark places, known and discovered by
Yeah.
people you trust. And for me, again, I know this is, our podcast, but I can't tell you how grateful I've been to Eddie over my entire ministry life. Because as a student, I did my internship with Eddie when he was a youth pastor at JC Body Shop. And so I got to be like his college, student and, lead worship for him. And when they were gone, get to preach.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember sitting in Eddie's office when he was out on a trip with the students, and their spring break wasn't the same as our spring break at IW. And so that week he said, "Oh, just use my office." I remember going in there and sitting in his chair and thinking, man, this would be amazing. This is so cool.
Did it feel like you were in Dad's clothes?
Yeah, I was like, bro,
This doesn't quite fit yet.
Exactly. But over the years, it has been this relief to be able to go and talk to him and to confess and cry, or like talk about not just failures, but dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kind of found out over the years that, like, if you share your dreams with everybody, a lot of people can't take those.
For sure.
Like, they can't handle, like, I remember I heard this one person, Tim Elmore, talking, and I got to know him over the years, and I'm a huge Tim Elmore fan. But he was talking to a group of us when I was in college, and he was speaking at a camp, and we were there, leading worship, and he talked about his goal of leading a million people to Jesus Christ. And early in his ministry, he'd go to certain things, like certain events with people who were famous, and try to, like, get with them, like, in an elevator and witness and share Jesus. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever. And then I remember being at a camp the next week, and, we got to be with Tim Elmore, and some person, like, ripping on him was like, "Oh, he thinks he's a big deal." And it's like, what?
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you share your dreams with people without, can everybody handle the things that you envision or that you desire in ministry, or does that need to be kept a little bit sacred as well?
Well, I think there's a level of keeping it sacred, or just going in with the expectation of my dream isn't necessarily everybody else's dream.
Yeah.
And I think you just have to be really careful with that, because if you go in with the expectation that they're going to have the same level of excitement and passion that I do, like, typically our dreams, like, they've been with us for quite a while, And so just to bring out this new thing to someone, and especially somebody that's super critical, I think you have to be really careful of that.
Yeah. I think there are safe people and there's unsafe people. So, I remember when I first started at the church, and I had felt this laid on my heart early on that the Lord was going to use me in a teaching role in the church. And so I was just waiting for that first opportunity to preach on a Sunday morning, and I shared my dream of doing that with a coworker, and my dream got stomped on very quickly. And it was like, dude, you don't ask to preach. You wait to be asked. And it was like trying to, like, really put me in my place. And it was kind of like, you arrogant, young guy, like, just calm down, And that to me was like, oh, okay, this is not a safe person to share my dreams with. But another example, I was just telling Marty about this today, actually, that, our lead pastor, I love the way he leads right now, and he is very much of a team approach and wants people to use their giftings. And he told me early on, when I came onto our leadership team at the church, he said, "Tim, I'm not a vision guy. I need you to speak into vision. I need you to dream dreams and share your dreams with me," type of thing, and, like, wanting to embrace whatever the Lord was laying on my heart. And to me, that was, okay, you're a safe person to share those with, and to process with. And so, I think maybe it's trial and error a little bit, figuring out who those people are, but there are individuals that are, man, let me help make these happen, and let's press into these together. Let's pray through these together. And then there's other people, whether it is that comparison thing going on or a competitive nature, and it's not safe. And so it's like, okay.
I think some of that's a personality thing, though, too. We just recently went through the Working Genius, and the idea that there are some people that are creative and visionary, and those are some people that will
That's really
see your
good.
dreams with you, and other people that it's just naturally their personality to critique and figure out those details that
They
may
call
not
it
make work.
discernment.
Oh, that's what it's called.
Air quotes.
So who's the author? The Working Genius.
Patrick Lencioni.
Of course.
Yeah.
What an amazing author, writer. Just
He created this whole new thing, and
Mhm.
when you partner it with the Enneagram, it's great because it's all about the Working Genius is all about workflow. So how do you do things? How do you work in teams? How do you know when to bring a certain person into the meeting time? Because you don't want to bring the discernment phase when you're in creative brainstorm mode. Because when you're just throwing ideas out and just seeing what sticks and building on it, you don't want that guy or that gal in there that's like, well, have you thought about, and like they just rain on your parade, and it like immediately shuts down the whole processing moment. And so, it's kind of like staging that work process.
man, that is a whole nother podcast.
Yeah,
That is
right.
a great topic right there.
Sure.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. That means you have to come back and do this.
We'll be back next year.
I want to continue though where we were headed
Sure.
and go to the other side. What happens when things are going so well? What are the dangers when everything's hitting on all cylinders? Everything's going great. Everybody thinks it's great, or you just had a big success. For us, for example, we just came out of Fusion, and you spend all this time working and working and working and praying and hoping things would go well, and then they exceed your expectations, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, we must be a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's just that. This is all about us,
Mhm.
and not really understanding the power in God and how He works through the things that we do and our obedience to Him. I find myself getting caught in that from time to time of like, yeah, I really pulled this off, and this was great what I did, and I have to remind myself like that this had nothing to do with you. Like, yes, I was obedient in that calling, but God, like we have to get it back to God.
Yeah.
Yeah. And constantly repenting, like, Lord, I'm sorry if I've ever made this about me, because it's not, but oddly, so this is going to be maybe turning it back to where we were. I wonder though, and I think I could speak from personal experience too, of the really high moments. I get crazy expectations then coming off of that. Like, man, 100 kids gave their life to the Lord. They're just going to run and start missions in Africa. And the reality is a lot of times, nope, next year they're dealing drugs. You know what I mean? Like where you have like, oh man, this was amazing. And then just wait a little bit and it didn't necessarily like have that momentum that you were hoping and envisioning. And I honestly kind of like view it back to that moment with Elijah on Mount Carmel when he like has this crazy victory, and he's showing off against these Baal worshipers, and it's this amazing God moment on the mountaintop experience. And then literally like the next page, he's wanting to kill himself. Like he's suicidal because he had just this crazy high. And then it was like coming back down to real life and seeing that, okay, things are still really messy. People are really messy. Ministry is really messy. And it's just a bummer, right? When you soar so high and then it's like, oh yeah, we have to come back down. I don't want to be that Debbie Downer right now, but for me, that's a very real thing where it's like, oh yeah, okay.
And that's really good.
That is good. Yeah.
When we think about ministry and especially in adolescence, working with students, middle school, high school, you see that with older people as well, that of course, but specifically in the adolescent range where you it was real. They made that commitment.
Mm-hmm.
You were there. You were crying with them and holding them as they wept and sought the Lord, and it was authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 weeks later, it is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a process of maturing and growing to become a disciple.
Yeah. That, and then the other piece too that sticks out to me is kind of the almost entitlement. I think when things are going really well and you are really successful, and it's like, yeah, I deserve good things. I deserve to be praised.
Mm-hmm.
I deserve to be, the guy or the girl in the room, and like, that kind of mentality. And I think that's super dangerous.
I love it when you're preaching back to back, and this would happen in chapels here at IW. But for a while, Jim Lowe was the dean of the chapels, and now Andrea Summers is, and great friend, and so, but in between, when he was trying to figure out what was next, I walked beside him for about 2 years, from STM, and like just walk with Jim and be on his team, as he's transitioning out of that into what's next, and he would always pray in between chapel. Like we pray for the first service, Lord, we need you, and we look to you, and there was almost that anxious vibe. And then after that first service was over, going into the second service, he would then pray harder. God, it's like, it went well. Help us not to become overconfident, cocky, or even arrogant.
Wow. Wow.
And we need to rely on you now more than ever, because we had the success of the first hour. Now as we go into the second hour, God, help us to, and that taught me a huge lesson.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure.
Do you see that when you're preaching multiple times?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Preaching's a weird animal. I do, on a Sunday morning, we have 3 services that I'll preach on a given morning. And so there are ups and there are downs, and there is, the in-between. I frequently, if it's going well, I'm praying like, Lord, help me. I don't want to do this out of the flesh. I don't want to do this out of performance, like kill that side of me. And please just like let your spirit move. But it's tricky. Like it's a battle when you're doing multiple services, because if you do nail it and things go really well the first time, then it's like, oh, I can just do that again. And you can become self-dependent pretty quickly if it's not that real focus of like, no, I've got to keep surrendering this to the Lord, because if he doesn't show up, it's not going to go well.
Gentlemen, it has been awesome having you on campus, hanging out. I mean, reconnecting for years. Because Marty, when you came here, I was out in San Diego for all those years.
Sure.
And so we never crossed paths while you were here. And then Tim, I was a rookie coming out of youth ministry and teaching classes, and you were very gracious as a student.
Dude, those were good days.
Yeah, dude. Fusion executive team leader. We had some good times.
Brother, I can honestly say thank you for investing in me. I tell people, like, as much as I enjoyed you in the classroom, when we were outside the classroom, road tripping, doing conferences, like I learned so much from you, and just appreciate all that you poured in. So this is awesome.
It's so good having you guys on campus. I'm just going to say this as we end here. That C.S. Lewis quote is so good. You can't change the past, but today you can do things to change your future. You can change the end with the help of Jesus Christ and allowing him to work in your life. So don't be defeated. Don't go after it as like whatever happened is now going to taint what God has next. That's not true. You connect with him, you walk with him, you submit to him, you trust him. I think God wants to do amazing things if we allow him, if we're open to it. So,
absolutely,
bros, thank you for being here. We have this unique ending on this podcast, and so Tim, if you want to start it out, since you have the highest voice of us all.
Boom, boom,
and boom.